Hello, and welcome to Anime Audio Commentary. Today I'll be commenting on episode 9 of Code Geass. If you'd like to watch along, then start watching now. So this previous episode, it's probably been the most pivotal one so far because Lelouch, he's formed the Order of Black Knights and he's sort of come out into the public eye in such a way that he just absolutely dabs on both the Japanese Liberation Front and the Britannian Empire as a whole. And, I mean, nobody looks good taking hostages, but by diffusing the situation and also showing up the Britannian Empire, he's making a name for himself. So I guess the big question now is, seeing as how Lelouch has made this big statement, how does he capitalize on it? I mean, immediately we're sort of cutting a few weeks into the future, but, to what effect? Has Lelouch been maintaining a low profile as Zero, or has he been causing more trouble? Trouble being, maybe not the right word for it. Though speaking of trouble, Kellen, she's something of, I guess, an important person, but... Okay. I was wondering if this was going to be something where, she shows good grace to this servant who's screwed up, but, seemingly not. I guess the salient point is that, she's unconcerned with these people despite them caring about her. Oh, here we go. It looks like Zero's getting involved with something. And I guess the idea here is that they're doing something underhanded that even the Britannians wouldn't necessarily approve of. At least not the Empire as a whole. And, their actions have drawn the ire of Lelouch, understandably. Ooh. Okay. So what's Callan doing? I mean, obviously at school she has this sort of, I guess a ditzy-dozy sort of persona, but... I'm wondering if that was an actor, if that was genuine. I feel like she wouldn't be so careless. Alright. So it seems like there are issues within the Empire. And, if they want to take care of other business, they need to make sure they have Area 11 on lock. And, that makes sense. You have to You have to lock down the territory you do have if you ever want to expand. And I guess seeing as how the Japanese Liberation Front has been destroyed, the biggest thorn in the collective side of the Britannian Empire would be the Order of the Black Knights. Granted, we haven't seen too much of them in action so far, although Lelouch acting nominally alone has been more than enough in most cases. Alright, so I guess that's worth remembering. Zero could have killed Euphemia, but he refrained from doing so. And if I'm remembering correctly, because it's been a little bit since I last watched episode 8, I think Lelouch sort of knew that Euphemia wasn't really involved. Sure, she might be a member of the Imperial family and all that, but, she's not like the others. She's not like Cornelia. Ooh. Is this going to be one of those weird episodes? I mean, I say weird, but, episode 6, where they were chasing the cat with the helmet, that was an interesting episode, but this is, considerably more bizarre. Ooh. I wonder what Lelouch is alluding to. Surely he wouldn't be acting so out of pocket as to say, like, you have like a sort of uniform when you're in the Order of the Black Knights. So I guess that's something. The students are, I guess, sort of quarantined at the school. Quarantine's not exactly the right word, but they're sort of prohibited from leaving. And whether or not this is a long-standing thing or a recent development, it's not exactly clear. I feel like it must be long-standing to a degree, because why else would this suddenly come about? What would have caused it? So there we go. That is something. Everybody's sort of concerned with the Order of the Black Knights. To the point where, people are sort of dressing up and imitating them. Not in any, real sort of actionable way, but, I'm reminded of, Robin Hood almost. This sort of, guerrilla folk hero. And I guess the idea here is that, similar to Robin Hood and all that, there is opposition to him. Royal opposition, as it were. But nevertheless, his cause is righteous. I think it is interesting that Callan is noting that without Lelouch, they would probably be entirely ineffectual. And I do think that is true to a large degree, considering what we've seen so far. Between them just being outclassed and Lelouch being basically a master strategist. So I guess what remains at the Japanese Liberation Front for, there are a few left, I guess, they're not too happy about this whole business, and I can't say I blame them. From their perspective, not much of this makes sense. Especially everybody seemingly committing suicide, that doesn't make sense. And indeed, they don't know about the Geass or anything like that. Alright. So it seems like we're learning a little bit more about Kalen and her family situation. You know, things seem to be a little tense. And I guess that poor maid, she seems to break a lot of things. I mean, granted, the incident with the ladder, it seemed like the ladder just broke. That's not her fault, but... man. One has to wonder, what use is a clumsy maid? Ooh. Okay, so that's a revelation, alright. For Kellen to be half Britannian and half 11. Oh. Ooh. Her real mother is the maid. That's... wow. I'm kind of at a loss for words. That's surprisingly bleak, the way Kalen talks about her. As being like this dim-witted airhead who's incapable of doing any real work. And like, you know, sure she might be clumsy, but she's... you know, she's her mother. You know, surely there should be some familial bond, but like... I mean, based on the interactions we've seen, it really does seem like Kalen resents her. And I guess some measure of resentment makes sense given the society she lives in, but even so... I mean, that just strikes me as kind of monstrous. Wow. And I guess, you know, seeing what Kalen's mother is forced to live with... oh. You know, it seems like, despite the horrors of her life, she's not willing to take things lying down. You know, that looked like, a little bit of mechanical equipment used to punch holes at long distances. Ooh. So this seems like a guarded conversation to me. You know, it seems like they're talking about the merits of the police and culprits and catching them and all that. And I guess the predictable thing happens. You know, Suzaku says they should rely on the police. Lelouch says, you know, well, they're incompetent, right? And, you know, this really does speak to their broader thoughts on, well, everything, really. You know, Suzaku wants to reform the system. Lelouch has no interest in doing that because the whole thing is corrupt. Now, I'm wondering, okay, so Shirley's trying to resolve that love triangle, but unfortunately, you know, Lelouch is either unaware or just not interested. So that's interesting. You know, a narcotic drug called Refrain that sort of makes you experience the past. That's, it's not good. And I feel like, you know, if I were to put on my tinfoil hat, I would say this stuff is sort of being smuggled into Area 11 to sort of pacify the 11s. You know, if they can sort of relive the past through narcotics, maybe they'll be more docile. Alright, so once again, Lelouch is being pragmatic. You know, you shouldn't just jump into a 5-on-1 fight here, even if it is the right thing to do. And I guess this is where he and Suzaku would differ. Suzaku would rush in there regardless of whether or not he got his teeth kicked in. For better or for worse. Now, of course, regardless of whether or not they've intervened, it hasn't saved them, seemingly. So I guess, despite not wanting to help, I guess Lelouch has helped the man, by effectively commanding his attackers to, get bored and go away. Maybe he wasn't acting out of the goodness of his heart, so to speak, but it certainly was a good deed. So I'm wondering if this guy's trying a little bit too hard, He's offering them a bunch of free stuff. Alright, so that's interesting. Based on this narration, the only thing that's sort of stopping the citizenry from becoming ordinary Britannians is a matter of pride, You can fill out the paperwork and do all that, but there's this sort of stubbornness in the 11s that prevents most of them from doing that. And, I can certainly understand it to a degree. Ooh. So I guess this is where Lelouch and Callan differ too. So, Lelouch doesn't show the same outward fervor that she does to the cause. Ooh. So, I think rather than building a firearm, Callan's mom was instead using refrain, which I guess makes sense considering the graffiti covering her room. That's some pretty horrible stuff. Now this is interesting. These two, they've both been the victim of a Geass and been utterly bamboozled by Lelouch. Now they're sort of commiserating over it. But in doing so, they might have some information they can share. Because, something tells me neither of them are really down or out, Sure, they've been sort of disgraced and all that, but it doesn't need to end that way. Now, I guess I do find it interesting that despite the Order of the Black Knights mobilizing and doing things, they're not using the nightmare frames. They're sort of going in person, which strikes me as a fair bit more dangerous. Sure, they might be okay if they have a superior strategy on their side, but I spoke too soon. I guess maybe it makes sense not to have an entire spearhead of nightmare frames, but one for support wouldn't hurt. I guess case in point, it has proven to be rather helpful. So I guess what they're finding here is that everybody's sort of tweaking out on refrain. And it must be an unsettling thing to see all these people being absolutely deluded. And I guess, worse yet, it's Callan's mom. I mean, sure, she presented herself as not really caring, but, she clearly does. And I guess that her mom is sort of thinking about her in the past, that's something. That's gotta be a tough pill to swallow. So I guess this is the unfortunate cost of her supposed weakness. By Callan getting distracted, she would have jeopardized things. And I guess even worse than that, she's sort of dragging her mom around too. That's it's not gonna end up well. I imagine it's no good to be sort of, hurtled around like this. So I guess Kellen's got a real choice here. You know, surely she can't just send her mom up the river, even if she doesn't really like her, but man, she is a burden right now. You can't fight if you effectively have to protect another severely impaired person. Alright, so seemingly, this is what Kellen needed to hear. You know, now she understands why she lived essentially a horrible life as a maid, but you know, I get the feeling that learning this only now is going to have tragic results. And at least Kellen sort of realizes that she is at fault here for being so monstrously horrible. You know, I guess we can only hope that some good comes out of this. I mean, I think it is worth remembering that despite this development, you know, it came at the cost of her mom basically being strung out. Like, that's not a good thing. Man, this was a heavy episode, and I guess the worst part is that, like, the hangover, for want of a better term, is rather severe too. Like, being rendered effectively like comatose and mute. I mean, if nothing else, it seems to have lit a fire under Kellen. I mean, if nothing else, this seems to be precisely what she needed. Alright, well that's it for this episode. If you've enjoyed it, then by all means, tune in for the next one. See you, Space Cowboy.